Hey everybody, welcome to a special Teal Tinted Glasses Ian solo thing. I promise this one will suck less than normal. I've got some notes prepared. We're going to discuss some things. I don't want to get too far into anything though, because I do want to have a show with the crew this weekend, provided the schedules align. Also, my kids are upstairs, so they might come downstairs and um, isn't there an echo? That's not cool. Shouldn't be an echo. Okay, give me a second here. Let me. Still an echo? Okay. I basically kind of an impromptu things. I just have like a bunch of stuff in my head, and I don't want it to be and I want to kind of get it out, and I want to do it in a way where I could save it for a show, but I kind of don't want to lose things in my head. Um, so I kind of want to get it out in the open here and just kind of do it. And plus, I don't really want a show where it's me just ranting for a solid 30 minutes and Kevin and Drew and Hockey Jerk are like in the little boxes in the corner making mojitos or something because I won't let them say anything. So I got a couple of things. Obviously, I want to get off my chest. I know that I have said that this team is broken from top to bottom. I'm going to try and elaborate on that. But I do have, and I'm going to watch the chat. It might be a little less interactive because I kind of want to get through this kind of quickly. But again, like there's going to be shows all summers, and there's lots of stuff obviously to talk about this summer. This is going to be one of the most interesting, maybe putting it mildly, summers for this team going forward. There's a lot of big decisions facing this team going forward. But I don't want to get too much into that today, obviously, because I think, like I said, we have a lot of time, and I really want Kevin and Jerk and Drew to be able to weigh in on these things. And I'm sure maybe some of the things that I talk about today, we can definitely weigh in on as well going forward. But I just, like I said, I kind of just wanted to get this out before I kind of lose it, as I've kind of just walked around ranting to myself a little bit. I'm going to set some ground rules first. Once this, like I said, this is going to be a little less interactive than normal because I don't want to get sidetracked. I really want to get through my thoughts here and then, and share them with you, obviously, because I feel like, I'm getting a lot of interesting, a lot of interesting tweets that, from what I said, which I expected. I think that some people have misunderstood me. So first ground rule is I might not be as interactive as normal, but I am watching the chat, and if something comes up in the chat that I feel kind of adds to what I'm saying, I'll use it, and maybe I can, wrap up with some stuff in the chat at the end of the rant, whatever the hell you want to call it. Also, I plan to be, calm. I don't think I'm going to like yell and scream into the mic. I think there's people that do that really well. I don't think I'm one of them. Okay, so the ground rules. First ground rule: I can say something's broken and I don't have to have the solution. I think a lot of problems come from, a lot of it's like, oh, well, if you were going to be, if you were going to fire Doug Wilson, who are you going to replace him with? I don't have to have the answer to that question. It's not my job. That's Hassel Plattner's job. And I think Doug Wilson's safe, by the way. Everything isn't all good or all bad. I think that as human beings, I think we look at things in very black and white terms, and I'm not here to do that. I think that you can acknowledge that good things have been done by a person and they've also done bad things. I don't think that you might even argue that a person has done more good things than bad things. It can be both. Like I don't want someone to come away from this and being like, oh, well, I'm just going to use, again, I'm using Doug Wilson as an example. Oh, you said this and this would Eric Carl, but the Eric Carlson trade, that was a stroke of genius. Yeah, I agree. The Eric Carlson trade is a trade that I do every day and twice on Sunday, even if he doesn't re-sign. Okay. Look at it doesn't have to be, it's not all bad. It's not all good. And I probably won't have as much to say on Doug Wilson really than than might be expected. Like I said, I'm not going to overly speculate. We got all summer to speculate on what comes next. And I want, full disclosure. Let's be honest here. You can go back to the start of the season. I was very excited when the season started. And I'm not going to turn around and say, pretend that I was all doom and gloom from the start, man. I will come out here and say, man, when we signed Erik Karlsson, especially when we signed Erik Karlsson, you can go back and watch that show. I was pumped. I was jacked. I was very, very excited for this season to start. And, things didn't, I think things went better than I expected them to by midseason, but I'm not going to sit here and pretend I'm a genius for saying, well, yeah, look, I said at the start of the season, this team would be in the conference finals, because by the middle of the season, especially close to the end of the playoffs, man, I had left this team for dead in a ditch. And I'm not going to pretend that didn't happen. But I'm also not going to pretend that, I wasn't, that I wasn't really excited when the season started. And I did say a lot of things, about how great this team was when it started. Last but not least, I'm not really going to overly get into officiating tonight, because I really want to focus on the team itself. Officiating is a topic for another podcast that I'm sure we'll have. But I will say on officiating that I don't really think officiating, the officiating wasn't good, but the officiating is never good in the playoffs. But the real issue, I think, is the ineptitude or lack of action by the Department of Player Safety and their inconsistency. I think you can't really sit here and be like, hey, Vegas, you got to roll with the punches and you got to deal with what calls you get, and then sit here and bitch about officiating for a half an hour. I'm not going to do it. The real problem is the Department of Player Safety, in my humble opinion. So let's get this started. Obviously, I said this team is broken from top to bottom. So let's go to the very top of this team, which would be Hasso Plattner. Now, again, not everything's good, not everything's bad. We don't really know. I'm going to be honest. I don't really know a lot about Hasso Plattner, and maybe that's fine. I can only go by when, they tell me he's around the team or whatever. But basically, the good is obviously he's not afraid to open his checkbook. And I think, from an owner, I mean, that's what you need to be competitive in this league. You need an owner that is willing to open his checkbook. I think that from the outside looking in, again, I don't know. I don't sit in the Sharks room, the Sharks offices, but and he's not Eugene Melnyk. I don't like, though, that Doug Wilson has basically, Doug Wilson basically has the autonomy to run this team without checks and balances. And I think that you don't want an owner to be, like we've seen owners that are overactive and really get in and meddle with things. And Eugene Melnyk's obviously one, but I think you can look at other teams too. Like Eugene Melnyk is the extreme example. But there are other ownership groups that really overly meddle with their team. Okay, yes, he runs SAP. I know. So I don't want an owner that completely over meddles to the point where it just kind of screws everything up, right? But at the same time, there just doesn't seem to be any checks or balances there. And I feel that Doug Wilson is kind of his, his hockey guy, and he doesn't really go, he basically takes one opinion, and that's that of Doug Wilson's. And again, I'm not saying that everything Doug Wilson does is ass, and I'm not saying that he's the best GM in the entire universe. In fact, let's be honest, teams are flawed. You can show me a team in the NHL that isn't somewhat flawed. Great. I would love to see it, because I think you could probably sit down, look at 31 teams, soon to be 32 teams, and you could pick apart all of them. Again, I don't have all the answers here. I can point and say something's broken. And how do you fix it? I don't know. Is it fixable? Is it worth fixing? Those questions. I mean, I'll leave those answers to you. I mean, so everyone's going to have like their own opinion on that, right? It just makes me, but it does make me concerned though that Doug Wilson doesn't really have any checks or balances, and I think that going forward, not to totally, again, I don't really want to get into too much going forward, but going forward, it's going to be an interesting summer, man, because the Sharks have a lot of decisions to make and not a lot of cap money to do it with. They really pushed all the chips in this season. And look, I approve of the way that Doug Wilson pushed all the chips into the middle of the table, because I wish more GMs would be like, with like Jarmo Kekalainen and Doug Wilson, where they say, yeah, we're going for it. Instead of, well, maybe we can lose and we'll get some draft picks and we might get Jack Eichel and, and things will just eventually be okay. I like that, So I look at management, and it's not, there's a lot of different things that you can say, pro management / ownership and against. And I don't like that Doug Wilson just seems to have absolute autonomy without any checks and balances. I think that, especially a guy who's run the team for so long, there should be some checks and balances there. But credit to Doug Wilson, because he's basically kept his staff together. It hasn't been overly pillaged, which you would kind of expect. Wouldn't you kind of expect his team to, like his management group, to get kind of overly pillaged by other teams? Like, it's weird that, a guy, I can't even remember his name right now, but like, like his assistant hasn't been interviewed by other teams. And even let's say you replace somebody, right? It's hard to say, okay, you're going to replace a guy. Cool. Who are you going to replace him with? Which is always the first thing that everybody says, right? Oh, well, you're going to replace Doug. Who are you going to replace Doug Wilson with? Who are you going to replace him with? Well, okay. Who knows? Right. I mean, look at a guy like Dale Talon. Okay, Dale Talon built a pretty damn good team in Chicago. Hasn't done crap in Florida. Do you think going to coaching? Do you think Joe Quenneville going to Florida is suddenly going to make them the Stanley Cup team? I have my doubts. I don't think that there's no proven way to do this properly. Like, I don't think there's any one guy who's magic. You kind of make the best of whatever situation you're given. So, as far as like, oh, well, you don't like Peter DeBoer, who do you replace him with? I don't know. Do something. Think outside the box, because, it doesn't matter. Like, you want to talk about, like Joel Quenneville, I think he's going to have a rough season in Florida. You look at Steve Yzerman. Steve Yzerman's a guy who people, point out and say, this is one of the greatest GMs in the league. I don't recall his Tampa Bay Lightning. Yes, they made cup appearances, but I don't recall them winning anything. And I don't feel like, isn't this the same Steve Yzerman's team who got just bounced from the first round of the playoffs? Like, there's no perfect guy out there, right? Like, there's no right answer here. You could spit a name out, and it doesn't, just because you hire the right guy doesn't guarantee shit. And I think that's the one thing that everyone needs to accept. So I'm not gonna overly go in. Coaching, holy God. I mean, I know that I have been very critical of Peter DeBoer, and I think I've been fairly critical of Peter DeBoer. I don't like the fact that he's so married to right or left defensemen. You played Joakim Ryan like 4 minutes a game, put extra stress on a clearly injured Erik Karlsson. You played Burns until he was dead. And I'm going to get more into that in a minute, but there's problems with Peter DeBoer. I know that, his numbers wise, Peter DeBoer is a good coach. Because I know I got thrown today, the fact that he's got the third highest winning percentage. And look I'm not going to argue the numbers. I'm just going to argue what I saw. And what I saw was having no answers for the the teams would make adjustments after the Sharks would win a big game, and the Sharks would have no answers for those adjustments. I don't completely blame Peter DeBoer for what happened with Erik Karlsson at the end of the Blues series. I would make a terrible head coach. I'm not going to blame, because I think Erik Karlsson and Peter DeBoer should share equal blame there, because I think Erik Karlsson should have realized that, shit, I'm hurting this team. I'm hurting the team, because look at those last 2 games Erik Karlsson played. I mean, the Blues basically ran their offense around Erik Karlsson. They pyloned him over and over and over again, and how he even started Game 5, I'll never understand that. But that's a problem that that's on Erik Karlsson too. That shouldn't be just on Peter DeBoer. That's on Erik Karlsson too. Erik Karlsson should have had the common sense to be like, look, I'm actually hurting the team at this point. But look, at players want to play. I get that. But I still, but it was an obvious problem, and it's something that Peter DeBoer should have adjusted to very, very quicker. Yeah, I mean, look, there's plenty of blame to go around. The way that the lines were deployed, I think, were definitely problematic. I think that, but on a player perspective too, I mean, there's some, and again, you can shuttle this up and down blame as far as, management, ownership, whatever. Let's be honest. A lot of the reason we were excited, because we looked and we thought we really liked what we saw as far as depth goes, and that really never really came to fruition. Like look at some of the depth guys that we thought were going to be guys didn't pan out. And that sucks. And I think that I was very high on some guys that didn't pan out the way we'd hoped they would have. And it sucks, and that's, and look at those guys there was players there that I thought had earned opportunities and were given opportunities and just weren't able to take it. And that's, it's not like the players are completely not at fault here. The players are absolutely, there's players that are absolutely at fault here, that have to take some of the blame. That the blame just can't be just saddled on Peter DeBoer. Although I think, again, Peter DeBoer, has definitely blame to take, but you've got some depth guys that didn't pan out the way we wanted to. I would fire for one season. Look at Martin Jones had a rough season. Yeah, he had, he came back and he had some redemption in the playoffs. And that's that's unfortunate. But he did come back. He did come back. He had a decent playoffs, but I don't know what we get from Martin Jones next year. I mean, the Sharks had to really play a lot of guys harder than they wanted to down the stretch because Martin Jones was ass. And you can definitely argue about players being set up to fail, for sure. Absolutely. Overall, how do I feel about the season? Look at, making the Western Conference Final. I mean, making the Western Conference Final is good. I don't like the way they went out. I don't like, there are a lot about the playoffs that I don't like. I mean, was I pleasantly surprised they made it as far as they did? Yes. Obviously, I'm not going to completely crap on it. But I think that when you overall look at things, it's frustrating too. I thought that the Colorado series lasted way longer than it should have. And I think the Colorado series for me is where everything kind of fell apart. Their inability to put away Colorado in a fashion which I think they should have been able to do had they been able to, make adjustments better. I think maybe the wheels fall off in the Stanley Cup final instead of the conference final because, the injuries eventually would catch up to this team a little bit. So I think overall, I mean, there's a lot to like. But there's there's a lot to pick apart too. Again, I thought this team was a one and done team in the playoffs. I thought they were just going to get rolled over by Vegas and destroyed. And I I don't know, what was it, game 5? I mean, I pretty much decided they were dead. But yeah, but Cody's saying in the chat, Cody James, the wheel was wobbling before the playoffs even began, and it's true. I'm not going to pretend I didn't enjoy most of the ride. Like I did, I'm a fan, man. I enjoyed the ride. I don't know. Again, who if I was going to replace Peter DeBoer, like I think Peter DeBoer is safe. I think Doug Wilson is safe. We can argue all day, should they be, shouldn't they be, whatever. They're safe. That's just the reality that we live in. Who do I replace Peter DeBoer with? I would call Toronto about Sheldon Keefe once Sheldon Keefe is done coaching the Marlies for the year. I think that's a guy whose career, and maybe that's a little bit of a homer pick for me because obviously, this guy got his big break here in the Sioux. But I really like what Sheldon Keefe has done. So that's a guy that I, would absolutely give a call to coach this team if for some reason Peter DeBoer was fired. It's not going to happen though. Like Peter DeBoer is not going anywhere. They just extended him. They're not firing him. It is what it is. I don't have to like it. I personally don't care for Peter DeBoer as a coach. I think he got outcoached every round of the playoffs. I think that's why, obviously he was able to make adjustments against Vegas that helped the team. But overall, I don't think that this, I don't really think he did a particularly great job this playoffs. I think I go back to that Colorado series and look at, again, it's not like, the guys under him have to perform as well. And I think that the Sharks totally just screwed the pooch in the Colorado series, period. Would I level that assistant coaching staff? Absolutely. I think that, absolutely I would empty all of his assistants. If you can't fire, if I can't fire him, if I can't fire Peter DeBoer, if I can't have that, which I believe I can't because I think he's absolutely safe, I would absolutely clear that bench. Although I don't think with Peter DeBoer at the helm, I don't know what else you would do. Look, going back to the players though, I mean, Evander Kane, God, man, when they do locker clean out, he better be super injured, like dislocated shoulder injured, because man, oh man, what a disappointing playoff for him. You definitely needed more out of him. I think that, you can look at Pavelski. Yeah, Pavelski's going to be a big thing. Going forward, I don't know what they do with Pavelski, man. And I have been of the unpopular opinion you walk. But man. I don't. Sorry, Cody. I don't mean clear the bench as far as the players. I mean clear the assistant. Just got the entire assistant staff. Maybe not all of it, but like Steve Spott, Rob Settler, these guys need to go. Whatever. Keep your video guy. I know Johan Hedberg is getting a lot of crap for Martin Jones's crappy season, but I'm not there. I think Martin Jones has his own stuff to work out, and I think it's really easy to blame coaching for when something goes wrong like this and the way the things ended. But yeah, no. As far as I don't want to get too much into this stuff, Skyler. As far as Thornton goes, if it's his final season, bon voyage. What a career. If he opts to go, you know, and again, I really don't want to get too much into this stuff because I want to make sure that there's, because look, I basically just kind of just started the camera and just started talking. I never really talked to Kevin or Drew or Hockey Jerk, so I don't really want to go too far into things that I know they're going to want to talk about. But I will say this very briefly, and then leave it at that. As far as Joe Thornton goes, if Joe Thornton comes back, fine. I'm fine with that. Obviously, we saw this season that he can play in a reduced role. I'm fine with Joe Thornton coming back. If Joe Thornton signs a 1-year deal somewhere else to win a cup, Godspeed, dude. You've earned it. I don't have any. I don't have any ill. I won't have any ill will if Joe Thornton decides I'm going to go to Tampa next season and win a cup. Like, honestly, Godspeed, dude. You've earned it. You know, and if he retires, then hell of a career. Hell of a career. And I don't think anything can take that away from him. And, you know, he's going to go down as one of my favorite players to ever play the game. You know, a guy I got to watch from junior, obviously went to Boston, a team I absolutely hate, and then became a Shark. I mean, it's such an awesome, it's been awesome watching his career from start to finish. And if he's done, he's done. Tampa Bay. I'm using Tampa as an example. So I think, as far as, I hope that in all this rambling, I've kind of outlined more why I think, why I've said that this team has top to bottom problems. Maybe some of it was vague and I didn't get into the detail that I would have liked to get into. And I didn't. And I apologize, if you kind of come away from this going, did he actually say anything? I do my best. I do my best. What can I say? But I don't know. Again, I don't have all the answers. I wish I had the answers. Then I'd be, I wouldn't be working nights at Tim Hortons. I'd be running an NHL team. I don't. But I don't know. Like I said, I think going forward, I think, you can deal with the wants and you can deal with the, wants and reality are two different things. Would I fire Peter DeBoer tomorrow? Yeah, I would absolutely. I think that, if I didn't eloquently enough say why I would move on from Peter DeBoer, I think you could listen to another podcast, which I really enjoy, Circling the Cup, man. They've done an excellent job eviscerating Peter DeBoer on a weekly basis, pretty much. And maybe they've done it more eloquently than I would. Yeah. Look at, I mean, again, when the Sharks do good, it's good. And going kind of back to what I said at the start of the show, you can go back and look at what is going on back there. Sorry. If you're picking up background noise, I apologize. You can go back to any team and you can pick it apart. You can pick apart, the eventual Stanley Cup champion. And you can find flaws. Salary cap teams are going to be flawed roster wise, maybe not so much management wise, but I still think, every management has its flaw. I mean, look at, you can bumblefuck your way to a Stanley Cup. The best team doesn't always, you can bumblefuck your way there. Peter Chiarelli is a Stanley Cup winning general manager. And we all saw how brutal he was in Edmonton. And you saw, look at Boston could very well, I mean, I hope they don't, because I hate Boston, but Boston could very well win the Stanley Cup. This is a team that was the laughingstock of the draft when they drafted Senyshyn, Zaboral, and DeBrusk, though DeBrusk has turned out to be a hell of a player. Over other players that were obviously available on the board. They had 3 picks, man. They could have had, could you imagine this? Okay, so you keep DeBrusk, you add Thomas Chabot and Matt Barzal. Could you imagine how stupid this team could be? Like, you can bumblefuck your way there. You can, Peter DeBoer proved you can bumblefuck your way to a conference final. you can get by despite doing dumb things. So I again, like winning a Stanley Cup is hard. Winning a Stanley Cup is also lucky. So I don't want to come, you can do these, you can get there. Look at, you could point out all the good things that Doug Wilson has done, and yeah, it hasn't ended in a cup, but you could also, maybe a bounce here and there, maybe they do. I think that I think that when I look at this team, I'm scared of this team going forward. I don't know. We'll see. I shouldn't really. I don't want to steal the. I really want to sit down with Jerk and everyone else before I kind of look too far forward. So that's my case of why everything's broken. I'm not saying that they should just turn around and fire everyone. I think that there's people that definitely should be fired. I just hate when people are like, okay, so you fire Peter DeBoer, who you're replacing with. Well, I mean, I gave a name, Sheldon Keefe. But some people are like, oh, well, you need an NHL coach. I don't agree completely. I mean, again, Joe Quenneville was the guy that was out there for a long time. And would I have argued if the Sharks had said, okay, Peter DeBoer, you're done. Come to San Jose, Joe Quenneville. If Joe Quenneville got hired midseason, I wouldn't be complaining. But it's definitely, it's definitely, it's not guaranteed. That wouldn't guarantee the Sharks a Stanley Cup. I don't think. I'm not going to sit here and say, well, if they had just hired Joe Quenneville mid-season, you could just be fine and everything would be great, and they would have won a Stanley Cup with a different coach. I'm not saying. No, Doug Wilson's calling the shots, Felix. I don't think. I mean, Hasso Plattner has given Doug Wilson a blank check to run this team, in my opinion, and I think that Doug Wilson, and it's been said on other podcasts. I think maybe it was on Sportsnet, maybe it was on the 31 Thoughts podcast. But like, I don't think there's a more powerful executive in this league than Doug Wilson. Like Doug Wilson, for the autonomy that he has, I don't think there's a more powerful executive in this league, period. Hasso doesn't do exactly what Doug Wilson says. Hasso just signs the checks. Period. Towards if you weren't sure. Again, I don't have the answers. I don't have all the answers. I don't know who you hire. I don't think there's. Look at if we knew that this coach equaled Stanley Cup, then teams would win Stanley Cups more often. Like there's executives that have Stanley Cup rings that also managed to completely mangle their teams. Look at Stan Bowman in Chicago. I mean, now Chicago might turn around quicker than I think people expect them to. Look at Dean Lombardi. Dean Lombardi won 2 Stanley Cups in LA. Look at the state of that team now. It's, there's no guarantee of a Stanley Cup. You can hire the best, you can hire the quote unquote best guy out there, and it doesn't guarantee shit. And I think that's, at the end of the day, that's the bottom line. As far as a rebuild goes, because I know I've gotten a lot of comments in my, a lot of tweets about, oh, well, you're going to rebuild. I'm not advocating for rebuild. The Sharks aren't going to rebuild. For one, again, want reality. Sharks aren't rebuilding under Doug Wilson. Doug Wilson isn't going anywhere. Okay, Illuminato, I'm going to get there because that's a fantastic question. Now, what was I saying? This is why I can't do solo stuff, because I forget what I'm talking about. So I'm going to answer Illuminato's question, and then hopefully I'll get back to whatever point I was trying to make. Would I care to elaborate what Doug Wilson does? What decision he makes that negatively impact the team? He extended Peter DeBoer for, despite the fact that things are bad. Rebuild. Okay, I'll get back to rebuild. I have notes. I just kind of get off on a rant. Doug Wilson has done some really good things. His he pushed all the chips in. I applaud him for that, but I'd also look back and say, hey, what the hell are you going to do now? Because your team is built for your team. Like the San Jose Sharks right now are Chicago without the Cups, man. You've got guys signed into oblivion, and now you're going to try and you're going to have to basically, put guys on the cheap in to fill in the thing. Both EKs were mistakes. I'm going to get to that too. Doug Wilson, here's my problem with Doug Wilson. Doug Wilson has a blind spot when it comes to Peter DeBoer. Doug Wilson also enables Peter DeBoer by bringing in a guy like Haley. I think Doug Wilson should have addressed the defense at the deadline. Because I'm going to try to say here. Yeah, I think he should adjust the defense at deadline, because if I'm not, look at Joakim Ryan played 4 minutes a game, and the Sharks also, the Sharks, this is a team that could not play with a lead. Okay, so when you can't play with a lead, what happens? Like normally when you're up, you're winning a game substantially, you can start playing other guys. Well, Peter DeBoer didn't trust those other guys to carry the team to the end of the game, where teams where the Sharks had significant leads got squandered because he didn't have the guys maybe he trusted. And I'm not saying Šimek not be, maybe I don't remember when Šimek went down. Absolutely fair point. If I can't remember if Šimek was pre-deadline or post-deadline. If it was post-deadline, I mean, that's a fair point. I think they were pretty good with what they had. I think Doug Wilson has a blind spot when it comes to Peter DeBoer. I think that Doug Wilson, Doug Wilson himself will say that some of these contracts that he signed are because of the way the CBA is, and he's 100% right. Look at Evander Kane. If he didn't get the money here, was probably going to get it somewhere else. I don't know. Look at the Evander Kane deal today doesn't look very good. Maybe next year he goes off and maybe he's, maybe he has a blown out shoulder or whatever. We'll see. I'm not trying to say that everything Doug Wilson does has been bad. I'm just saying that there's some blind spots that really hurt the team this playoff run. There's just, but there's some things that Doug Wilson oversaw that, are unfortunately, problematic. Yeah, we'll see what happens. Erik Karlsson, again, look at, as far as Erik Karlsson, I don't consider the Erik Karlsson trade a mistake. Look at, Erik Karlsson has been, has had some significant injuries, but he's generally been a rock solid guy. The guy, look at the number of games he's played, over the past 5 years. I mean, yes, it sucked because he came to San Jose and he got, and he spent most of the year hurt, and that sucks. That's shitty. There's an element of shitty luck there. Let's be honest. That's shitty luck. But yeah, I would do that trade. I mean, what did you give up? Chris Tierney. Again, I think that the Sharks had a more difficult time replacing Chris Tierney than they should have. Dylan DeMello, big deal. Bottom pair defenseman who just ended up playing with Thomas Chabot and had a really good season playing with a guy who's going to win all the Norrises going forward. I do the Erik Karlsson trade 100 times, and I continue to do it. I would do it. I'm not going to hold that against Doug Wilson. Did it work out? No. Obviously, injuries being a factor there. But I would do it again. Erik Karlsson is a hell of a player. And I don't think that there's anyone that you would put in this lineup that I would be like, oh, well, that's better than Erik Karlsson. Illuminato says I think he would have taken a spot otherwise. I don't. If DeMello had stayed, I think DeMello was fine where he was. Again, you got Erik Karlsson. You got one of the greatest defensemen, top 5 defensemen to maybe ever play the game for peanuts. But I mean, I was saying, we didn't jive with the team after we had Burns. Yeah, I look at it. Was it a little bit overkill on the offensive? But I still do it. I'm not gonna begrudge. I don't know. I mean, we could argue that with maybe with Burns here we didn't need Erik Karlsson, but I still do the trade, man. I think that if we were fortunate enough to get a healthier Erik Karlsson, then that would have been much better. Trying to think here. Yeah, I don't know, man. I do the Erik Karlsson. I am not going to crap on Doug Wilson for getting Erik Karlsson. I'm not going to. And if Erik Karlsson decides that San Jose isn't for him, we can talk about that later too on a future cast. But if Erik Karlsson doesn't stay, I don't begrudge him either, man. I mean, I think that he doesn't owe the Sharks anything. The Sharks tried to sell him, and I think that even if Erik Karlsson doesn't re-sign, I think with the benefit of hindsight, you can be like, oh well, that was a terrible trade. I disagree still. I think that the Sharks have had a good record of bringing in guys that have been traded in and stayed for a significant period of time. Not all our deadline guys generally didn't work out, but generally don't work out. But I feel like guys that the Sharks bring in at the beginning of a season or early in the season, like a Joe Thornton, a Dan Boyle, Doug Wilson has had a really good track record of getting those guys to stay. So if Erik Karlsson's a swing and a miss, it's a rare one for him. So I can't fault Doug Wilson for that specifically. I don't know. Kane, Evander Kane, I hope he's injured, because if he's not, then he was a dud and that contract looks terrible. If he was injured, then I guess the contract looks less terrible. But I feel at the same time, again, here's Peter DeBoer. Everyone's complaining that hurdle before he took the head hit fell off. Peter DeBoer is a guy that basically threw anchors on Tomas Hertl, and then why isn't Hertl producing? I don't know. So I don't really want to go too much further than this because there's a lot of stuff that I want to break down. I want to let the guys have a chance. I just wanted to kind of rant, I guess, as far as rant goes, and then and then that way when we actually do a show, I feel less likely to just sit here and hug the microphone while the guys twiddle their thumbs. So who do I got in the finals, Boston or St. Louis? I think Boston's going to win the cup because that Boston, long-suffering Boston area, as far as that city. I mean, shit, they need a championship, don't they? Those long-suffering fans need a championship. Boston, I think Boston has it. I think Boston's just a top-to-bottom killer team. Would I be sad to see St. Louis win? No. I think Boston want St. Louis is what is how I feel. But I hope the Blues beat them. I hate Boston so much. And that just goes because I just never been able to shake my dislike of the Boston Bruins because as has been noted before, Blues don't have a cup. All right. The the reason why I hate Boston so much is because before I was a Sharks fan, I was a Montreal fan. And as you know, Montreal and Boston, not exactly the best of friends. So, and I've just kind of, it's always been a team that I've kind of always just carried a hatred for, even though I could give two shits about the Montreal Canadiens at this point in my life. So anyway, I will, Skylar, do you think there's a neon sign at City Hall in Boston that says X number of days since the last sports championship? Probably. I think that the most frustrating thing about this playoffs is going to be, this final's going to be, is just probably the narratives going into it. Like, oh, St. Louis is going to go get revenge for something that happened before any of the players that were born, stupid nonsense like that. And I'm going to leave on one note. I apologize for being less active on social media than I probably have been previously. I really found, this is going to sound really stupid coming from me, because social media has given me this amazing platform to do what I do and to find an audience to do what I do. But man, social media really negatively, like this year especially, really negatively affected my enjoyment of the playoffs. So I tried to do as little on social media as possible, because I don't like being angry. I like to try and be a guy who can have a rational conversation. So I have to avoid situations that make me irrational. And social media this playoff made me incredibly irrational. Outrage culture is bled into hockey. Yeah, I think that's exactly it. I don't know. Social media really hurt my enjoyment of the playoffs this year. Sometimes it just hurts my enjoyment of life, period. Anyway, overall, it was a hell of a ride. It didn't end the way I wanted it to. It didn't go the way I expected to. It was a hell of a ride. I'm going to try and sit down and hammer out a time to get an actual show done with Kevin, Drew, Hockey Jerk, or any combination of those fine gentlemen. Who do I hate more now, Vegas or Boston? That's a good question. Probably Vegas. I mean, Vegas is more of a rival to the Sharks. So Boston's not really a Sharks rival per se. They're just kind of a team that I've hated, that I've kind of just carried with me. Vegas is definitely a team that I hate more, because they're more directly impact what happens with the Sharks. Anyway, I've been doing this for 47 minutes. 47 minutes, probably 17 minutes longer than I thought I would do. But thank you for watching. I hope that I have elaborated on some of my thoughts that I've made on Twitter that I really didn't feel like, writing 17,000 tweets. So hopefully that answers some questions, and I look forward to more tweets and more talking hockey, because I'll be here all summer. Who am I kidding? All right, guys. Thank you for watching. Have a good day. Peace out.